Hey guys, so in this video I just wanted to share a little bit about my story and my experience with mold and toxin exposure. It's a major reason why I decided to create this little series, just spreading more awareness about mold and mold toxins and how it can really make some people really, really sick and things like that. Um, I found out on hindsight I've actually been exposed to mold much longer than I had realized because the signs for mold exposure can be really subtle. It's not always just like a itchy nose or sneezing, and it's not always just respiratory stuff either, though I did experience that. But what I would notice is in the past, I'd say the past 3 apartments I've had, no, 4, because I do suspect my college one had mold in it too. I just didn't feel well. Like, I didn't feel right. Something felt off, but like I didn't really have words to describe how I felt off. I just noticed I'm like, okay, I am getting deeply depressed here. But, those of you who know about my background, I've been dealing with like other chronic conditions and things. So I thought it was just those things just kind of getting to me. Um, but I started to notice that I didn't want to go back to whatever was my home at the time. So I would find I'm just like, I just don't want to go back to my apartment. Like, I would feel a sense of dread going back to my apartment. And it wasn't because like I was living with anyone who was like toxic or abusive at this point in my life. It just, I don't know how else to describe it. It was just a really deep sense of dread. I thought maybe it was the lighting because the lighting in a lot of these apartments were not that great. So I'm like, well, maybe I just need sunlight. But then I noticed I would start having to work harder to breathe. It wasn't that I was short of breath, like I was hyperventilating. I just felt like my muscles had to work harder to breathe. And in my mind at the time, because I was young and ignorant, I thought that that meant that, okay, it's not shortness of breath. I just have to work harder to breathe. I must be depressed. And I was, but um, fast forward a couple of apartments later, when I actually saw the black mold like growing behind the toilet and around the toilet, and I started to notice like there was a pattern behind when I went into the bathroom and how much worse I felt, even though I felt like crap in the entire apartment the last one I was in. And I'd noticed after a while I would start to feel really anxious, and it feels more like a physical anxiety for me more than like the psychiatric, because there is a difference. It feels much more physically visceral. Um, at least that's how I experience it. I noticed I did start having issues breathing. Like, I couldn't take in as deep of a breath. The air that I was breathing in just felt really, really off because I started to notice the difference between the air in my bathroom and in my apartment compared to when I'm outside. And by this point, I had reached that same point before where I just dreaded going into my apartment. But again, I thought it was because it's a dark apartment. There's one window and there was one patio door, and that was it. And there was a unit above me too. So I thought it was just because it was dark lighting type stuff. And then I'm like, okay, let me learn a little more about this mold stuff. And I started feeling lightheaded more. That's when I started actually having like moments where I would pass out and I would fall on the floor. But then when I go to get checked out, they don't find anything abnormal in their testing, you know, that sort of stuff. It's one of those like subtle things. And it got to a point where it, like, initially I would feel better after leaving the apartment, but after a while I would find my system was just so wired and it was so full of toxins at this point, because I did actually do some mold testing and toxin testing, and they found high levels of several toxins in my system, um, and molds. But I found that like I wasn't feeling better as quickly. Like, my system just felt really fragile. Like, it did not take a lot of doing anything physical at all for me to start feeling lightheaded, for me to start feeling heart palpitations, for me to start having headaches. Like, just simply getting up to go, like getting up slowly to go and feed my cats, like, was enough because my nervous system was just really overloaded, you know. And then I ended up finding out that, you know, the toxins that were floating around in my system, they weren't detoxing out of my system as fast as like a normal person would. Um, so I've learned a lot about not only like the effect of mold and toxins that can have like on your nervous system, because there's a lot of neurological symptoms that um, I wasn't aware of that mold and toxins especially can cause. But there's also a lot of things that I was told about mold and toxins that come to find out is just not true and outdated, as far as like you have to visibly see it, or like the conditions it takes for it to grow and things like that. So because of that, I wanted to make this video in this series just to kind of share what I've been learning, and hopefully it helps save someone else a lot of time and hopefully save some money, and be able to respond to their situation a lot better than I did, because it took me years to figure this out. So with that said, I will see you guys in another video.